Smith-Yang, and I'm the Capacity Building Director at Capacity for Health, and I'll be serving as the host for today's webinar. Our presenter today will be Steve Liu of Compass Point Nonprofit Services. I'm now going to tell you just a little bit about Capacity for Health, review the logistics for the webinar, and then turn it over to Steve. Next slide. Capacity for Health does work with all kinds of HIV prevention programs across the country, as well as community-based organizations that support the health needs of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. Beginning April 1st, we will also begin working with health departments. And I'll say a little bit more at the end of the webinar about the services we provide. Next slide. So in terms of logistics, this slide reviews some basic things. What I really want to highlight for folks is if you would like to ask a question, and we're striving to be participatory, please chat it in any time during the presentation by typing it in. We may not get to all questions, but we will do our best. There will be times in the webinar for us to take your questions, and Steve will be posing some questions for you to discuss. If you plan to speak up, we strongly recommend that you use a headset with a mic or call in on the phone. Our experience is that internal mics don't work so well for conversation during a webinar. And if you're viewing the webinar with several people around the computer, please feel free to chat in participants' contact information so we can add everyone to our contact list. Next slide. So we're very pleased to introduce our presenter, Steve Liu. Steve is Senior Project Director for Compass Point Nonprofit Services, where, among other services, he teaches board fundraising. He also coaches staff and board members in fundraising approaches. Steve is a former board member of Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training, or GIFT, and brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to today's topic. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Well, great. Thank you, Jacob. And really pleased to see the great list of people that are on the webinar today. I'm really excited to be able to teach this topic, and I hope that it's going to be useful for you. As you saw in the title, it's about building more powerful fund development work or fundraising work and working with your donors through your board members. And we'll start by kind of giving a little bit of context. But from there on, I really want to have you all think about how your board is doing. I'm assuming that your role by being on the webinar is either you're someone who is in a leadership position on the board or is a staff person who is probably most responsible for working with the board in fundraising, whether you're a development staff or an executive director or some other position. And so really hope that you can apply and think about some of the specific situations that you have related to your board and related to their performance in terms of being able to work as a team to develop donors for your organization. Speaking of donors, I do want to be specific and say that while much of this conversation today in the webinar can apply fairly readily to institutional donors like foundation staff, or many of you are funded by government, so your program officers and those agencies. Really what we're most focused on is board members and what they can do to really build strong relationships with community donors, people who are in the community who are writing their checks from the checkbooks, getting cash from their regular income, people who are giving because they want to support your work because it means something to them. So that's just to make it specific when I talk about fundraising and donor development. Can we take the next slide, please? So we're going to be looking at not so much fundraising techniques, because those are things that you can actually get from attending a fundraising training of some sort, and there's many out there. But we're really looking at what's the important conversations that you need to have at the front end in terms of recruiting board members, getting the right fit, and then really setting them up for success so that they can really do the work that you want them to do throughout the year in fundraising. And then if there are challenges, which there typically are, then how to have a conversation so that you can sort of get on the right track, or even potentially determine mutually that it's not a good fit, and that there's other roles that that board member can play besides being on the board, besides being a fundraiser. We're also going to look at, just as we go, you'll kind of get a sense of what are some of the readiness things that we need to have in our organization in order to really work with our board members well. And then finally, Compass Point, the group that I work for, did a national study a year ago with 2,700 respondents who are EDs and development directors and nonprofits around the country. And we want to highlight a few of the lessons that we've learned from that study called Underdeveloped. The main point being that we found that a lot of organizations, almost half, said that they did not really have a fundraising culture or a culture of philanthropy. And that's one thing that we want to sort of end with, which is how you can think about that. Next slide. So my name is Steve Blue, and I've worked at Compass Point for about 15 years now. Prior to that, I was an executive director at an AIDS service organization in San Francisco. It's now known as the Asian Pacific Islander Wellness Center. And that's where I learned fundraising, or at least I should say that that's where I learned the type of donor development that we're focused on today, which is really trying to build sustainable relationships with people who support your work, who want to give money and perhaps their volunteer time. And it's your way of, your organization's way of building those relationships so that it's actually contributing throughout the year, and that it's actually contributing to their satisfaction also, so that they're not just an ATM machine delivering money to your organization. Next slide, please. I also work at Compass Point. One of my favorite projects is actually called the Fundraising Academy for Communities of Color. And as you can see by the photo, I'm on the left side there with my team. We partnered with the Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training, which is a great national resource, and I really want to have you remember the name because I'm going to be referring to some great resources that they have. It's the Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training. And together we offer this academy focused on nonprofits based in communities of color in the Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area. So here are some of the stance that we have and some of the things that we hope that people are taking away out of the first 2 days of our academy. One is the awareness that donor development doesn't just fund your work. It's not just a way of bringing in money from anonymous donors or people that we really don't know. It's also a part of really building relationships, and I know that you probably heard that if you're in development or gone to training. But what we mean is that it's not just about their donor relationship. It's about the relationship that they have with the actual work that you do. And one of the things that we like to say is that fundraising is also about your mission work, or if you're doing important social justice work. It's actually about building the commitment of your constituents to the work you're doing by them actually giving you money and having a deeper investment in your success. It also means that you have to be more accountable to those constituents in order to really have that regular practice of giving. We also really, around board members, is to recognize that there are volunteers, and we need to be able to use our skills, how we might work with any other volunteer, to make sure that they are supported adequately to do this important work of fundraising. And when we think about a system of fundraising, a system of developing donors, they're really one part of that development effort. The other part is you, assuming that most of you are staff. And then really the types of information systems that good organizations that are doing sustainable development need to have, which is a good database supported by donor management software. So really being able to have those pieces along with your board members as volunteers. Now, one thing that we're going to be focusing on a lot in these conversations is actually this last point, which is accountability. And I think some of us are probably pretty good at that, but when it comes to fundraising and working with our boards, this is where I feel like I see us stumbling a lot, which is how do we actually hold accountability of board members as well as ourselves to the goals that we want to have in fundraising. So the stance here is that in order to hold people accountable, your board members, it actually requires that you do what you're asking others to do. So we need to be donors to our organizations. We need to think about what is a personally significant gift amount that we can give each year. And we also need to think about how we can bring in our contacts, how often we can be in touch with them, so that when we ask them, we actually do have a relationship with those people to get them to consider giving. Can I get the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'd like to just hear from folks in terms of these are, I'm going to do a couple polls, but these first two are really around some of the kind of outcomes I think we'd all like to have when we talk about board fundraising. I'd like to get a sense from you, where is your board at right now? You know, hopefully it might be getting better, or maybe it was better before, but where is your board right now? So think of first, how many board members do you have? Then think of all the ways in which you're asking them to participate in raising money for the organization. And now think of those, the full board, what percentage of them are actually making a financial contribution. So again, this first step of being a donor. How many of your board is actually making a donation each year? Less than a quarter, almost half, almost 100%, or if everyone actually makes a donation consistently each year. So please go ahead and click the poll, and we'll look at the results. Now, as we're calculating, I do want to say that there's a lot of different policies that people try to consider in terms of board giving. And the stance that we like to get people to think about is that it is important that everybody gives. It's actually less important that it has to be a prescribed amount. And that's why we use the term personally significant to each person, meaning that each person has thought about what would be the biggest gift that I can give to an organization given that I'm on their board. All right. So it looks like, based on the poll, we've got most people's boards, it's actually less than a quarter who are making a contribution each year. Then next up is groups that are about half. And then what's really nice is the yellow bar, which even though it's not the most predominant, actually looks like a significant amount of you have been able to get your board to really see that commitment. So great. Obviously, there's some of the things that we're going to be covering that probably are working for you right now. What we want to do is wherever you're at in this equation here is to underscore that building a culture of philanthropy really means that your board members feel connected to the work you're doing. They're not giving a donation just because they think it's required, but that they've thought through what in your work actually means something to them, why it's important that they're spending their time there, and then to make a gift from that commitment, from that understanding. Thank you for participating. Let's go to the next slide. So the second poll, and this will be the last one we do for a while, is again looking at your participation now. So not just in giving, but thinking of all the things that you're asking to do fundraising-wise. How many of your board actually participate in at least one of those activities? And one of the things we like to say is that not everybody has to do exactly the same thing as everyone else. So rather than prescribing that people all sell 10 tickets to your event and all make 15 calls, we really want to have the appropriate participation of people based on what they can do well. So let's see here in terms of just percentages. How many of your board members are participating in the fundraising activities that you plan? Some of you might be having a hard time thinking of all the things you're doing. And so one of the things I think I want to say about, again, supporting board members is that there has to be a commitment from your organization that you're clear what it is that you're planning to do throughout the year, that you've given them ample time to think about what they can do, and that you've hopefully talked about those commitments early in the year. All right, so let's see the results. So in terms of what % of board members are active in participating in fundraising activities, that's great. The big bar looks like nearly 100%. Some of you, it looks like some of you are still really struggling with having your critical mass, and I'm hoping that what we're covering today will help move the dial on that. But for those of you who are at nearly 100%, then probably one of the goals you're thinking about is how can I actually have the engagement that I want from people, so in other words, people participating, but perhaps them taking more initiative, or actually, really being more energetic about how they're pursuing these activities. And finally, that you actually have powerful relationships, meaning that this work of getting board members to be involved in fundraising actually adds to the impact of your organization overall. It's not something that's a chore, but it's actually something that adds power to the work you're doing. All right, so we can move to the next slide, please. So actually, I'm really pleased to see how many of you guys are getting some level of participation. So let's build on that. But in our study, the national study called Underdeveloped, and you can actually see the full report on that by going to our website at compasspoint.org. We found that actually the state of development, the state of working with board members is a pretty widespread problem. So just a few of the findings very briefly. 3 of 4 executives say that their board fundraising is lacking. Less than half of the development directors that were surveyed report having any influence on being able to get better board member participation. I want to pause on that because what does that actually mean? If you've got, if you're blessed with having a development director, someone there specifically to organize and to do the planning and to basically help the organization reach its fundraising goals, then it's actually a tragedy that that many development directors cannot actually influence board member participation. So what that says is that based on our leadership structures, we haven't figured out a way to really value or to position our development staff, who are really the professional fundraising staff, to get the results we need from board members. So I want you to think about that for a moment. If you have development staff, people who are specifically have development in their title, how are you positioning them so that they actually do have that influence, that respect, that support from you to work directly with your board members? And it does mean that we have to think about that kind of traditional way that the board members, the executive director is the only person who has access to board members, and to really think about how we can, in a shared leadership way, empower our development staff to work one-on-one with board members and even work directly as a group with them. Just about a third of these organizations have actual board fundraising committees. So in terms of structure, that is one pretty important piece to have, which is a subset of your board members who have agreed to spend more regular time in between the board meetings, really working with staff to think through what are the most appropriate ways that board members can be involved in their fundraising, and then actually to join with your development staff or you as the ED to basically get each and every board member matched to the right type of activities. Finally, we know that groups also say that they lack a culture of fundraising and a culture of philanthropy, and we're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Can we go to the next slide? So just another picture of this one is the board that just stepped off of the Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training, And as you can see, it's a really vibrant group here. We're all raising our fists. It's actually gift, I should say, is dedicated to helping social justice organizations raise the money that they need, primarily through grassroots fundraising. And the banner in the back is our semi-annual conference, Money for Movements, which actually, if you're on the East Coast near the D.C. area, you might consider registering for that workshop, which is going to be happening August 2nd and 3rd, I believe, in Baltimore. It's going to be the first time that we do this national conference on the East Coast, and so it's a great opportunity for you, if you are there, to get 3 days of great learning and networking with other social justice groups that are really figuring out how to raise the money from their community. So how do board members add value? That's a question, and I think not just around fundraising, but around governance and all the other things that we're hoping board members do. But we really want to think about this phrase, time, talent, and treasure. I think you might have heard this before, but basically we're looking not just for money, but we're looking for their time, and time that's appropriate, meaning that they're not just coming to the full board meetings, but they're actually thinking through where they could be the most value and assistance to your staff's work, whether it's advising, whether it's setting up meetings with funders, but basically the work that happens in between the board meetings. Treasure stands for the financial gifts that each of us think about in terms of what's personally significant to us, and again, our talent. What is special to each one of us as board members that we know we can add to the organization's work. There's one other point here, which is that oftentimes when we talk about or complain about board fundraising or how our boards aren't doing enough, we're really thinking of them as one monolithic group. And that's kind of a trap, because if we're only working with our board, getting them sort of oriented to fundraising or making requests to them, as a group, we're not really understanding then what is it that each board member can actually do. What would be their special talent that they could bring into this? Who are their specific contacts that they have? So I want to just offer those questions below as a way to think about one thing that you can do if you haven't done this is to actually make the time in your calendar this month to schedule at least 4 one-on-one conversations with your board members, and to try and, over time, as a goal, having one-on-ones with each and every board member, ideally in the beginning of the year. And use these questions. What is it that you care about in our mission? What is the reason that motivates you to actually serve on this board? What do you need to know in order to contribute fully to our board? Oftentimes, if people are only getting information through the board meetings, then you're actually missing out on what they probably uniquely need to know in order to do the work that you want them to do. And then finally, what can we count on you specifically for? And one of the things that a lot of people really appreciate when we do fundraising training around board members is actually to share a template, and I want to offer this that we could probably send out after the workshop, which is just a simple template that you can plug in all your different fundraising activities that you've done throughout the year, and actually give people the opportunity to consider ahead of time what they're willing to do and to check off the areas that they're planning to do, and to quantify that in terms of how many tickets are they going to sell, how many people can they introduce to the organization. But those are the very specific things that we want to hear from people in terms of what can we count on them for. I want to pause and just invite people, if you have some questions, to feel free to go ahead and type them in, and I'll try to work them into the presentation as we go. So take the next slide, please. So we mentioned that a culture of philanthropy or a culture of fundraising is actually not very present. Most groups, when they hear a description for it, they realize that they're not operating in that kind of work culture. And a culture really is, what is it that we all, when we walk into the board meeting or walk into the work site or office, what is it that we actually know are the ways that things get done in this particular organization? And so culture of philanthropy really means that well, we're going to get to that description in just a moment, but I want to define what philanthropy means because oftentimes that can be confusing also. We sometimes think of philanthropy and philanthropists as the wealthy people who give the most money. But actually, the way we define philanthropy and looking at the root meaning, it's really voluntary action and giving for the common good, which is something that's very democratic. It's something that actually over 75% of Americans do every year, which is to give money away. So through this definition, actually most of us are philanthropists. Next slide, please. And of course, in order to build that culture and to get the kind of fundraising results we want from board members, we do have to have these kind of tools too. So along with the culture of philanthropy, we want to have good information about our donors. And again, that gets to where in our survey we knew that about a quarter of the organizations didn't have a database they were tracking their donors. So that's really essential to have. Case statements or ways of talking about the organization. Those can be one of the most important tools for board members because they're not living your organization the way you are, 5 days a week. They have only a few opportunities to actually get to know and be able to practice describing what you do. So a case statement is very important. Stories, and one of the ways that you can easily start building more of a deeper commitment by your board members to do this type of fundraising is actually to bring in stories each of your board meetings. Have it, 10 minutes on your agenda in your hour-and-a-half meeting, and then to encourage board members to start sharing a story about what is it that prompted them to be involved, or what is it that keeps them involved in the work they're doing. Finally, to be clear about the mission, being able to connect the mission as you're raising money, and finally, for all board members to really have a clear understanding of what it takes to actually do the work you do. One of the biggest gaps in knowledge for prospective donors is that they actually think that a lot of nonprofits are just volunteer run. They don't really understand how much it costs to do the work that most nonprofits do. So making sure your board members have that financial literacy is going to be really important so they feel confident going out and making a financial request. Next slide, please. So here's some ways that I want to think about powerful fundraising. And again, it's not so much, the results are really important, I would say. I mean, that would be powerful fundraising also, is that you're meeting your financial goals. But let's look at what's underneath that. One is that you actually have specific fundraising goals and that are lined up with what people are actually doing throughout the year. So in order to do that, you have to have a very realistic income goal in your budget, and specifically how you're going to get there through different fundraising strategies. Again, if you don't have a fundraising plan, then it's always a good idea to access online resources or go to a training or workshop on actually how to put together an effective fundraising plan. But this is really essential to aligning people's actions to the goals you want to reach. Two, that people are actually doing the work that are matched to what they do well. There's a lot of interest in not just the nonprofit world, but actually the business world around using people's strengths rather than focusing on deficits of what's not happening. And so one of the things about strengths is we know that each person has specific talents that come much more easily for them. And those are the things we actually want to understand so that we can connect them to how they could benefit specific fundraising activities. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. But you actually have to take the time to know what people's strengths are and ask for them. And then number three, good communication and accountability. And that would look like that you're actually hearing back from people when you send out that group email. You're hearing responses back. or when you're making calls to follow up with board members, that they're letting you know where they're at with the particular goal that they're working on, whether it's a fundraising campaign or cultivating people, and when they need help. So can we go to the next slide? All right, so this is, I want to talk a little bit more about each one of these things of powerful fundraising. One, that goals and people are aligned. So as I said before, you want an actual number in your budget and then probably sub-numbers of your different types of ways you're going to raise money. They're actually not what I call magic numbers, the numbers that we kind of like sneak in there because we know that we haven't sort of reached our government funding goals and we know our expenses are this much more, so we sort of put a placeholder number in there. So we want to think through what it's actually going to take with the different fundraising strategies, and then actually do the reality checking of what's it going to take in terms of people, volunteers, to actually do those strategies well. That's when we'll get alignment with people. Time-based, that your strategies actually have months, weeks, and days calendar to them. So one of the, if you don't have a full fundraising plan, actually just putting together your 2014 calendar and making sure that it gets in front of the board each and every meeting so that they can see what you've got planned for each month that relates to either cultivating donors or asking them. While I know many groups are moving away from just doing their fundraising at the end of the year, what we want to have sustainable donor relationships and fundraising is to actually try to have plans for donor cultivation, identifying new donors, and then asking donors to renew. That's happening 4 times a year, or as often as you can manage those things. Finally, that board members know how to plug into these strategies, and I mentioned what we call individual fundraising plans, so a template that people can actually fill out ahead of time that's really directed towards the plans that you have. Fundraising committee, and then one of the things that we've done, in terms of at GIFT is we actually have our list of donors that we're reaching out to in a particular campaign. We'll share it among the board members on a, let's say, shared Google Doc, so that each of us can sign up for the donors that we're going to be reaching out to and can be tracking in real time, and usually it's over 2 to 3 weeks of a campaign, how we're doing. So that way that staff can see, how many calls we've made, what our responses are, what more we need to do, and then staff can also follow up in that way. So using technology in terms of a shared online spreadsheet can often be one really practical way of keeping people engaged. Now, I understand from one of the chat questions that it might be a little bit hard to hear, so I'm hoping that folks have been able to mute their background noise, and I'll speak up a little bit more. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, please. So we talked about strengths, and as you can see in the background here, we all have different strengths, superhero strengths. I'd like to see if we could just click on some of those examples here. One, think of your board members right now. I want you to think of the different names of people, what you know about them. Some of them are probably pretty good project managers, people who like to stay organized, who actually get satisfaction from checking things off their checklist. Usually they're more achievement-oriented, so that actually that's a strength, achievers. They get satisfaction from getting things done. These are the people you want to get to know, and you want to be able to see how they can use that skill to work with you around events. Most of us do have events. We probably have too many of them in our calendar. But we want to make sure that those events are actually doing all the things we want them to do, which is to introduce new people to our organization, to get the regular donors at the event so that they actually renew the way that they feel about the organization, build their commitment, and consider making a larger gift. So in order to do that, we actually have to have those events come off seamlessly. And so getting people that have your project management strengths that are on your board, in your events committee is going to be really a nice match. Let's go to the next skill. Who are the folks that really are great communicators? So in other words, they have no problem sharing with people why they're involved in your organization. In fact, many of them might have been former clients, or they may actually have their own personal experience that they can connect to the work that you're doing. They're the folks that you want to be able to use at the event to do your pitch, or if you're having face-to-face meetings with your foundation staff or individual donors who you're asking to make a large gift. Those are the people that would have no problem being able to make that connection with the donor and talk about why this work is so important. Let's get the next one. I would count myself in this group, people who really like networking. And when I say networking, I'm not just talking about meeting as many people as possible. I'm talking about actually holding something about the people that we're meeting in our head. And actually, at a later time, when someone's asking us for some help or there's a particular problem coming up, that we actually know, we remember those people that we met, and we actually have a good idea that maybe this person's would be a great resource for this issue or this challenge or this problem. And it's actually a good opportunity for them to get plugged in. So that's the kind of networking that I mean. So some of you are really good at meeting folks. This is a strength you need to use on behalf of the board to bring in new people to the organization, to know who might be a good fit for your board, and again, being able to build your list of prospective donors. Can we get the next strength? Okay. Some people may not consider listening a skill, but one of my areas of work is as a coach, and those of you who are in the mental health field know that actually listening is a skill. There's different levels of listening that we can have: distracted listening, listening that's all just about the listener, so self-referential listening. When we actually are doing what we call level 4 listening, where we're really fully giving our full attention to someone, we're listening to not just the words, but what's underneath those words, and really getting a sense of who that person is, what their needs are, what they value. That's the type of listening skills that some of us have, and actually comes pretty easily because we just hone that skill, or we really value that. So if you're that type of person, or if you can think of some of your board members who happen to be good listeners, that's a great skill for actually having them making calls to your donors and doing the cultivation conversations, like really asking them, what is it that they care about? Why are they giving to the organization? What do they need from the organization? And with those good listening skills, you'll be collecting great information that you'll be able to use when you're actually asking people. Okay, and I think the last strength here, which is people who are comfortable talking about money. And actually there are people like that. If I had a poll here, I would be curious how many people here are in some sort of role where you're either the financial manager or controller for your organization, perhaps you're the treasurer. People who have no problem with numbers and actually really enjoy looking at the relationship of income and expenses and cash flow. Because those are the people who are going to have no problem whether it's getting on stage or in a meeting with donors, talking about what your financial needs are and being able to explain them clearly enough so that people actually do get that your organization's work is important and that it actually requires significant contributions in order to make that work. The other interesting finding that I found in a survey conducted by the Haas Junior Fund was they found that board members who had some sort of financial management background, who were usually sort of on the finance committee, that interestingly enough, those board members were the ones who were better performers on all levels, meaning that they followed through on their commitments for the board. They were usually stronger fundraisers, people who were able to bring in more money. So if you can start discerning who on your board has that strength, really focus some time on getting them involved in the fundraising activities you have. All right. I'm seeing a question here. What kind of leadership, or maybe which of these strengths does a fundraising committee need to succeed? Great question. I think that, really that project management strength is going to be really important on your committee. Usually you staff it with the ED or development staff or someone who's going to help provide some of the system backup for the work that volunteers are doing. But you really do want to have someone in your committee that's focused on organizing people and timelines, because that's really the role of committees. It's not just to do the asking, but actually thinking about how your whole board can be involved and making sure that individuals are actually following up on what they say they're going to do. So having that project management skill, I think, is really important for the leadership of that committee. Probably also good listening skills, too, just to be able to know where different board members are coming from. So thanks for that question. Let's go to the next slide. So now that we've gone through these strengths, let's just do a quick poll. Don't think about this too much. But which of the talents that do you most are most aware of that you have? And again, you might have several of these, but I'm just going to ask you to pick one, the one that sort of stands out to you the most. So again, are you a great listener? Do you love managing projects and people? Are you natural at networking? And perhaps a strong communicator, or great with money, talking about money. Okay, let's go ahead and just pick one. And let's go ahead and see the poll results on that. While we're tabulating that, I'll just mention that the two surveys that I mentioned, both underdeveloped, you can get our full report on the Compass Point website. And there's another survey that I mentioned, the one about different board members and performance. And I believe that was done by the Haas Junior Fund, and that's spelled HAASJR, haasjunior.org. And if you either call them or search on their site, I believe they have that study there. All right, so let's see the results. So, looks like we've got a lot of project managers. That's great. So, what does that say? It means that use that strength to get your fundraising committee together if you don't have a fundraising committee yet, because you can use that skill to start that structure of a subset of board members based on their talents that are going to help organize other board members. Looks like we've got a lot of networkers. I can't see, oh, there's no communicators on there. Okay, that's probably why I'm not hearing anyone right now. But good, I'm glad to see that there's a number of people who feel comfortable talking about money. I'm hoping that you're finding that strength when you are going out and talking to donors, because actually that's a really important thing to cover in your case statement about how much it costs to do the work you're doing. Let's go to the next slide. So what we want to do in the last 15 minutes is think about communication, and I'm hoping that we can actually demonstrate a couple of these kind of conversations that are going to be really important. On the other side is accountability, and that's a piece that I tend to think most of us shy away from, which is actually holding our volunteer board members accountable for the things that they understand is their role. And when we set them up well for success to actually do that kind of fundraising work, then we need to hold them accountable. So let's look at the relationship here. You as a board member on the left side, you as a board leader or staff person, do need to make sure that you put forward clear expectations, whether it's in the recruitment of new members or when you're actually renewing the full board for the next year, to really put forward in a consistent way and probably a frequent way what those expectations are, whether it's about giving or the calendar of activities you have that you want them to plug into. If you've done that, then you really need to have accountability from your volunteer board members that they've understood that and that they agree. Okay? And don't just leave it at they understand it. Make sure that people actually agree with those expectations so that you can talk about them and make sure that they are working for people. Okay? To try and get plenty of notice and ample support for them to participate. And I mentioned the Google spreadsheet when you're actually running your donor campaigns, where you're hoping all board members are going to be reaching out to people once letters have been sent. That's a good example of the kind of support you want to have. Consider really training people in advance, having a group training on how to ask, how to get through that phone call, giving people scripts so that they can have something to lean on when they're making calls, giving them good information about the donors that they're calling. Those are all the things that we want to support them around. So on the other side, board members need to be able to state what they can do. So when you're getting ready for the campaign, you should ask, and they need to tell you how many people they can reach, which names specifically are they going to reach out to, and what's the kind of support that they need. If you are checking in with people, this is what we'd like to stress, is that actually check-ins need to happen not just in group emails in terms of like letting people know we want to check in at the next board meeting, or we're going to send out an email to everyone to hopefully hear back from people. Those are useful, but I found that you're oftentimes sending it out to out to the universe and not hearing back from people. So one-on-one follow-up is really important. So set aside, board members need to be able to set aside the time to actually get things done so that they can respond. As a board member, I've often found that I have a tendency to sort of, even though I've gotten an email from someone, it sort of prompts me to actually know that I haven't gotten it done yet. So sometimes I'll say, well, I'll respond once I get it done. And actually what we need to be able to do as board members is to let people know that we haven't done it yet. And then being able to say when we can get it done and whatever else other help we need. Now, one of the things that we try to gift is when we're raising money as board members is actually we've scheduled dates on our calendar where we get on the phone together for 15 minutes. It's usually during the lunch sort of middle of the day for most people. And what we do is we just do a quick go-around by phone to say where we're at with our calls, where we need help, and also to report out successes. And if you have 15 members who are on the board doing the campaign, then a 15-minute call is probably just right, just to be able to do that very quick check-in and see where people are at. The other thing that we ask them to do is to, when we're kind of getting everyone ready face-to-face for the campaign, we ask them right there to get out their calendars, and for whatever number of weeks the asking is going to take place, we ask them to look at that month and to put in actual time slots on their calendar when they're going to be making their calls. That seemed to really help a lot in terms of people being able to have a structure so that they don't sort of forget about making those calls. They've actually made the time. And then finally, you as leaders need to be able to communicate not just when things are not working, but actually when you're having successes. And this again gets to the one-on-one acknowledgement, not just as a group, but actually maybe a week into your campaign, your fundraising campaign, being able to share with people in a group email who are the 3 people who got to their calls and have finished their work, who's actually gotten a bigger donation than what was asked for. So those are the things we want to be able to communicate out to people so that board members and volunteers know that there's actually things happening and that it reminds us to sort of be involved. And then, again, we need to be able to talk about when things aren't working for us and what are we learning from what didn't work. Now, there's a question here about who's responsible for enforcing accountability, the board chair, staff. I would say all of the above. If you're on the call, you're probably one of those people who needs to hold board members accountable. And while respecting hierarchy and sort of some of the traditional ways that boards and BDs organize themselves, With fundraising, I really want to say that this is not about governance. This is about people working as volunteers for the organization. So in that way, staff have every responsibility and authority to actually hold board members as volunteers accountable for the things they said they're going to do. It is actually effective if you have a board leader, like a board chair, who can do that kind of checking in with people, or the board fundraising chair. But if you don't have that person yet, then I would say that staff members need to be able to think about being able to follow up, knowing that you're following up with volunteers and not necessarily your governance group. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to move a little faster because I realize that we're getting towards the end of the session here, but I do want to just give you this example. I'm not going to read it, but I think this shows you some really, oh, actually, can we back up? Ken, can we back up to the slide before? Previous, yeah. So this is just an example to LinkedIn, and again, when you think about recruiting board members, obviously you're not just trying to recruit fundraisers for your board, you're looking for lots of skills, but here's some specific language which gets to that fundraising expectation. And you know, I hope most of you are using LinkedIn because I've seen some really great ads looking for volunteer board members that are written in such a effective way that I think that's probably going to boost up your recruitment efforts and expand your networks. So these are two examples, and I just want to point out that both of them are specifically putting in language about both making a donation as well as the ways that they want people to contribute to the fundraising effort. Next slide. And this is an example of, which I thought was written really well, which is it's not about fundraising, but it's about thinking about when you're doing board recruitment, what are the very specific skills you're looking for and how you're going to use them. So in other words, you may, at this point in your organization's development, actually need to be managing people much more effectively, both at the board level and the staff level. So finding the right human resources professional, someone who does this in their day job, and is willing to actually think through how talent management and how performance management works in your organization could be a great contribution. So Peace for Kids, the organization here, is pursuing that type of person. So again, go on LinkedIn and take a look at some of the job descriptions for board members that they have out there. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're just looking at a couple actual ways of conveying your expectations. And I'm guessing that you're going to get a copy of the slideshow, so I don't want to take a lot of time reading it, but this is just some simple language about how to explain what your expectations might be for board members. It's putting across actually that you do have a financial goal that you want to raise. It's not just we're hoping everyone will help us raise money. It's actually saying what that goal is, and then being able to say that you're reaching that goal partly through your board in terms of asking people to renew their annual contributions and introduce personal and business contacts to your work. And then again, some of the language around not everyone has to do the same thing, but we really want people to find what is their way that they can participate. And finally, the important question in Lawrence, is this something you can do if you join our board? You want to make sure that you confirm that that's something they can actually do. If they can't, then you might ask, what are the ways that you can contribute? What would hold you back? And really try and do some problem solving. The bottom line is you may want to be able to say no if that's not a good fit. Next slide, please. Okay, I see here that that we will be sending out the slides, so hopefully this language will be useful to you. All right. So this is just an example of a conversation I had recently with a board member. And so I want to give you that language because it's about, some of us may really cringe at being able to tell a volunteer that they're not doing a good job or that, they're not doing what we've expected. But actually when they're volunteering, their work is just as important as a staff person. And I think most people actually appreciate this kind of feedback if it's given in a way that's not sort of just wagging your finger at them. So the important thing here is that we use observations, and we try our best to give the observation without any judgment or assigning any interpretation of what their intent was. So in the first bubble, it says, Marco, you agreed to call 12 people by the 20th. It looks like you've reached one person. So that's obviously just looking at what happened, the facts. It's really important, in the next bubble, it's really important that your contacts are reached this month. What can you do differently, and what's your next step? What support do you need from me? So again, rather than trying to assign any type of intent, like, oh, you must be busy, or you don't really care about this work, any of those kind of things that we might interpret about the behaviors, we just want to be able to say it's really important that it gets done, and to go to part about action. What is it that you can do differently? Is there any support you need from me? It might even be actually getting them to learn about what's preventing them from getting to those 11 calls. So to focus on the positive, what has worked for you so far? What worked in reaching that one person? What's getting in the way of you calling the other 11? So again, feedback, checking in, holding people accountable is really important. It may feel difficult at first, but we know we can do it in a way that will not make people feel bad. Next slide. This is another example of a way of having a conversation about board performance. And again, with a little bit of changing the names and things. This is a conversation I had with a board member the beginning of last year. Someone who was very enthusiastic about her participation, but in reality was not able to actually do what she wanted to do. So the conversation, as you can see, was really about recognizing both her positive intent, but then actually saying, we actually don't know if this is going to work because it doesn't look like you're able to fulfill what you wanted to do. In the little bubble there, I know that you believe in our work. We need board members who can help make this work happen. Is it still possible for you? So again, we don't have to just say, get off the board. We want to help people think about, is this something they can still do? And if not, what might be a different role they can play? Now, I realize by the clock here that we've reached the time, and I do want to say that I'm happy to stay on for another 10 minutes if there's anyone here that has questions, because I know that this is hopefully something that is relevant to conversations you need to have. So if we can move to the next slide. About authentic conversations. And again, think about what's the most important conversation you need to have with a specific board member right now. Is it about their performance? Is it about perhaps something that you're requesting that they do that would make a huge difference for the fundraising work? What I'd like you to do is to go ahead and think through, could you use observation and could you actually make a request to that person? And if you're interested, go ahead and put it into the chat box right now. Let's see if we can use some of these skills to help you figure out how you're going to have that conversation. So if anyone has an important conversation that they need to have with a board member, go ahead and share it right now in the chat box. I understand some of you are going to need to leave the call right now, so I hope that this has been useful for you. Again, feel free to reach me by email if you'd like, and also the Agent Pacific Calendar Health Forum. I hope that the rest of your day goes well. And looking to see if anyone has a conversation that they'd like to work on here. Okay, well, Jacob, it looks like we could end the webinar, and so I want to hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Next slide. Okay, and keep going. Next slide. So there's some resources, additional resources for capacity for health work and for some of the resources for fundraising that Steve just mentioned. So you'll see them on this slide, and then on the next slide, you will also see some capacity for health resources. We will be sending out the slides that will include Steve's email address. This webinar was recorded, so if for whatever reason you missed part of it or want to review part of it, you can look for it recorded on our Capacity for Health website. Next slide. Oh, you're at the end? Okay. And just to say in closing that the work of a board around fundraising is really important, and much of the work that we do with our organizational clients really focus around how to engage boards more effectively. And I couldn't agree more that Steve is really sending a great message about this work is really about advancing the mission of an organization, not just about fundraising. Thank you so much.